And so they do have Sons of the Confederacy, but I mean, it's decades following the war. So it's unions only. It's also males. There's one instance, just a quick aside, I'll give the full details in the chapter here, but there's one instance where the Grand Army of the Republic let a woman in because her husband had died. She took his place and went under his name, served for him. They figured it out later when she went to the hospital. They figured it out pretty quick. And she had done such a great job and had been commended for service as her husband that they let her actually join. They amended their rules for that one woman. It's organized in Decatur in Illinois in 1866, and at the time there's lots of competing organizations. This is just one of dozens of veterans organizations. But because of a couple of smart things they do and the way they organize, they quickly basically just absorb all the others. And they become the big canary on the block. And around 1890, they've got 9,000 posts across the nation and almost 400,000 members. This is a force to be reckoned with. This is a much smaller America. Total military service in the Civil War is 2.5 million. So you can see they get a really high percentage. If you served, you have a very high chance of being in the Grand Army of the Republic. It's just what you did. So a little bit about it. It's quasi-military. They've got their own, here's the songbook that they had that they'd get together, and there's songs about different battles and different things that they would do. They publish an entire ritual book so that all of the posts have the same ritual. Let me just share with you to give you a feel for these guys. This is the ritual that they would use to close every meeting. Okay, every meeting ends this way. Commander, is there any further business? Commander again, our duty for the day is performed. As we go from this place, let us not forget to take in our daily lives that fraternity of feeling that should bind us, that charity which should prompt us to the noblest sacrifices, and the loyalty that will bind us in faithful performances, duties of our citizenship. Vice President, on what rests the hope of our republic? The senior vice commander would come forward and say, Sir, one country and one flag. The commander would then say, Junior vice commander, how may our country be kept undivided and our flag maintained unsullied? And the junior vice commander would step forward. By eternal vigilance, which is the price of liberty. The commander would then say, Officer of the day, what should be the doom of all traitors? The officer of the day would step forward and say, the penalty of treason is death. And all the comrades, that's what they called the members of the Grand Army of the Republic. All the comrades, it says, respond, the penalty of treason is death. Then the commander says, such be the doom of all traitors, and may God keep you true in fraternity, charity, and loyalty. I declare this meeting closed. That ends every single meeting. Okay, whether they're just coming together to vote on rules or whatever they're doing, that's the way they end the meeting. This is a hyper-patriotic organization. Okay? The members wear a dark uniform, very similar to what we saw in Ephraim's presentation. It almost looks like a Union Civil War coat. They wear this kind of ribbon, a big ribbon that looks suspiciously like the Medal of Honor. From 20 feet, you couldn't tell if somebody was wearing the Medal of Honor or was a Grand Army of the Republic veteran. And Congress gave them an exemption in the law. This group is so powerful that Congress rewrites the federal code to allow them to have their badge look like the Medal of Honor. I mean, that's a lot of clout. They hold rank. You are a colonel, you are a captain, and it doesn't have to do with your military rank on active duty, but, you know, it really has to do with your military rank on active duty. Most of the colonels on active duty, and I think this is absolutely fair, were colonels in the Grand Army of the Republic. They have encampments. They don't have meetings. They have posts and districts and departments. Guess how the Army was organized during the war? Posts and districts and departments. Okay, it mimics that wartime organization. They hold posts. You don't have a president, you don't have a vice president, you have a commander, and an adjutant general, and a quartermaster, and a chaplain, and a surgeon, and a judge advocate general. And you act as if you're in the military when you're there. They have special passwords. In the front of this ritual book is their secret code, which I always thought isn't really secret if they're publishing it. But it's their secret code that you take an oath not to reveal to any non-members of the Grand Army of the Republic. This is a serious thing. Some chapters are meeting on a weekly or more often basis. I mean, this is a big deal. It kind of consumes your life. There are three, as you heard in the oath at the end, there are three pillars were loyalty, fraternity, and charity, which they would often abbreviate as FLC. And the women's organization, this is their guidelines right here. They have a women's relief corps and an auxiliary group. Their little badge is smaller, so it will fit on the lapel of their dresses, and it simply says FLC, Fraternity, Loyalty, and Charity. The Grand Army of the Republic, though, has influenced us to this day. You may not recognize it, but every time you celebrate Memorial Day, you are celebrating a Grand Army of the Republic holiday. They actually called it Decoration Day, and it begins very early following the war. They're the folks that do this. They spearhead it, they push the legislation through Congress, and they make it a really big deal. They also make the Pledge of Allegiance a national event. Now, when it first comes out, and you may have seen pictures, do you know how the Pledge of Allegiance was initially done, just as an aside? It was not done like this. It was done like this. Now, when do you think that changed? My dad remembers as an elementary school, he said as World War I, boy, Dad is snappy. As World War II dawns, he says we stopped pledging this way to the flag and started pledging this way to the flag. But they're responsible for the Pledge of Allegiance. I mean, they make it a national thing. The flag to these people, to say that the flag is sacred is an absolute understatement. I can't stress how they hold the flag. They hold it in just reverence to the point of it being almost a religion with them, as we'll see in just a minute, as they come into conflict with the church. This is such a powerful organization. They elect 5 presidents of the United States, okay? Grant, Hayes, Garfield, Harrison, and McKinley. So into the 20th century, the Grand Army of the Republic, if they come behind you, you win. And they formally are not a political organization, but if they, all 5 of the candidates that they officially back get elected as president. All 5 of these are veterans. Okay, they're very, very big on veterans affairs. As we look at this, this is a list of, this is published by the Grand Army of the Republic. This is a list of how many people serve from each state or territory. Any noticeable loss? Yeah, where's Utah Territory? The Grand Army of the Republic does not even include us in their list. Now, granted, our number would be 106 because we had Lotsmith's Cavalry Company as the only officially state active duty organization. But we're left off the list. I mean, they include Dakota, which doesn't have many more. It's not just an omission. They're sending a political message here. This is published in the late 1870s, and by that point, Utah and the Grand Army of the Republic have had, well, shall we say, a falling out. And so let's look at some of the results of that. This is the letter from Brigham Young to his Lieutenant General, also counselor in the First Presidency, Daniel H. Wells, who we saw reorganize the militia, telling him that he's received from Lincoln, under his express direction, that he should organize a company of cavalry for 90 days, and we heard about that 90 days period of service. Just an aside, I learned about this and put this piece together after we published the book, but the day Brigham Young writes this, he receives the telegram from the War Department from Lorenzo Thomas, the Adjutant General out of the War Department. He receives that telegram in the afternoon and writes this letter at 9 at night, same day. Within 3 days, the unit is organized and sent out. What I just learned is that the day Brigham Young writes this and receives that telegram, his dentist, John L. Dunyan, who is the Surgeon General of the Nauvoo Legion, has just pulled the last 3 remaining teeth in Brigham's head. Brigham is in a great deal of pain as he's dictating this letter, and he's probably dictating it slowly because it probably hurts to talk. I just found that kind of an interesting little side effect. So Brigham is now toothless when he's dictating this. They do go out, and this famous painting of Frank Thomas's does highlight the Lotsmith Cavalry Company, and it's with this group that the Grand Army of the Republic primarily has their beef. They don't seem to have any fault or concern if you're a Latter-day Saint and served from Ohio or from Illinois or New York. We don't have lots of records on LDS, but we don't have it. Couldn't find information where someone out in those outer posts, if they're Latter-day Saint, that didn't seem to be troublesome. It's with this unit. There's a particular rancor develops here in the territory of Utah regarding folks from this unit. Part of the reason is with Camp Douglas, where we're sitting right now. Think back now to the 1860s as this camp, or fort as we know it now, is established. It's still a ways into Salt Lake City. It's not part of the city like it is today. I mean, it's established out. Just as an aside, one of the first court cases involved that I found involved from the camp was they used the water out of Red Butte, and they let their horses use the water out of Red Butte, and then it washes down and the saints have it to drink. And so one of the first court cases involving the Army sends them to court, and there's actually, I think, a couple members of the Quorum of the 12 in the jury, and they find against the Army and tell them, clean up the water, come on, we're downstream. Just an aside. This big flagpole, by the way, Ephraim showed this picture. I've always thought that Connor's just making a statement that we're here. The federal government is here. That's a way big flag for that pole. Okay. But I love these two pictures because they are not looking at each other. And that just sums up visually the relationship these guys had. As we heard, they're not even willing to meet. To say that they dislike each other is an understatement, and it's mutual. Brigham has some very colorful language in some of his language that you would not use around your children about Connor, and Connor equally is colorful about Brigham Young. They genuinely don't like each other. That figures into the relationship with the Grand Army of the Republic. There is general distrust across the nation about Utah. I came across this New York Times article which just astounds me every time I read it. Let me share this with you. This is I think November 1865. The war has ended. Here's what the New York Times editorial board has to say. It is my firm belief that in the spring of 1861, South Carolina was more loyal to the Union than Utah is today. Boy, let's think about that for a second. In spring of 1861, what has Carolina done? In December, they seceded. In January, they fired upon the Star of the West while it's resupplying Fort Sumter. And on April 12th, they fire on Fort Sumter and cause it to surrender. And then they go into open armed rebellion against the United States. But, according to the New York Times, they're more loyal than those rascals out in Utah because they're in open rebellion. What was Carolina again? You know that. But this is kind of the sentiment that's out there. Utah, that distance from the states out here to this territory, it's more than just miles. There's a cultural gulf, and there's a big gulf of misunderstanding.